just want to set the world on fire.
What's that? Mutant Mayhem. Hey, what's up? My name is Pip, and today we're going to talk about upgrading the Mutant Menace deck. I have 4 different upgrades here, 10, 20, 50, and $100 upgrades. I'm going to start by saying my philosophy around Commander. I don't build decks with infinite combos, I don't use many tutors, I try to make decks that are fun to play. We're looking to play an actual game with attackers and blockers and having interaction. That's what I'm looking for here. With most of these Precon decks, there's a bunch of cards that don't really fall into the game plan that they stuff in there, and so I'm going to find some cheap options all the way up to some expensive options for you to upgrade this deck. Take a look down in the description, you can see all the deck lists. They're on Moxfield, they should be pretty easy to add to your cart when you're looking to buy some of these upgrades, so check those links, made it easy for you. I'm opting to take this deck in the direction where you're trying to win off of rad counters and large creatures. You're trying to play a controlling game where you're making your creatures large and defensive, and you're trying to proliferate a lot of these rad counters and hit your opponent with mill, maybe eventually finishing someone off with some large creatures if you get to that point. So let's just dive in and take a look at the $10 upgrades. Kicking it off, we're adding in Invasion of Amonkhet. This is going to help you mill. It's going to give you the best creature that's been milled in the game so far if you flip it late game. So this has some synergies with everything else you're doing. Adding in Thrumming Bird. Thrumming Bird is going to help you proliferate. It's a nice cheap option. So you can have that online when you play your commander and hit that second rad counter on each player on turn 4, which should be super fun. Adding in Evolution Sage. Evolution Sage has landfall to proliferate, so I'm adding a little bit more mana ramp later, so the landfall will come into play with that. You have a few fetch lands in here, the basic fetch lands, so that's synergized with those. Flux Channeler, whenever you cast a spell, you're going to proliferate. You have a few storm options here. I added a few cantrips, so this has some synergies with those. Tainted Observer, nice cheap creature that has a repeatable proliferate. You have a bunch of creatures in this deck, 27 creatures. This is going to let you continually proliferate, and you're going to have a ton of mana because you're playing rocks, you're playing extra ramp. So this should be a good repeatable win condition. Azuri, Stalker of Spheres, 7 mana, well 4 mana for a 3/3, but if you pay 7 instead of 4, you're going to proliferate twice, and you're going to draw a card every time you proliferate, which is going to be a lot of times. I'm adding a ton of proliferate cards to this deck, so this should end up paying off. And also a nice cheap card, 60 cents. Solemn Simulacrum, add this to just about every deck I can. It fixes your mana if you're not finding the right colors, draws you a card, replaces itself. It's just a solid creature. Consuming Aberration. Here we are. This is a very fun win condition. It's going to have power toughness equal to cards in all opponents' graveyards, which if you have your rad counters going, should get pretty high pretty quickly. And then, whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals the top card of their library until they reveal a land card and they put the rest. So it's going to add even more mill to your plan. Look out for this one. He should be pretty strong if he stays online. Contentious Plan. Contentious Plan is just a cheap cantrip. Sorcery speed, so that's not that great, but it's going to proliferate for you. Up that rad counter count. It's also going to add +1/+1 counters to everything that you have those going on, which should snowball pretty quickly. We have Kadamas Reach, some good ramp, finds you that extra land as well. Pretty primo ramp, so I'm adding that one in there, even though it's a little pricey at $2. Spread the Sickness. Pretty nice removal spell, has Proliferate tacked on sorcery speed, which isn't great, but I think the Proliferate is really going to add to your game plan, is worth the extra mana you're paying for it. Looking at instants here, we have Experimental Augury going in. It's going to proliferate, draw a card, give you some selection. Pretty nice card. Also adding in Flotsam and Jetsam from the new set. This is going to, you're pretty much never going to want to play the left card here. You have some synergies with milling, and Investigate's okay. You have nothing else to do. Jetsam, though, is really where we're going to find some power here. You are going to mill 3 cards from each opponent, and then you're going to cast their best spell or best creature they've milled all game. Doing that for 6 mana from 3 players should be pretty powerful late game. Adding in 3 of the signets here, Dimir Signet, Golgari, and Simic. Just a few more mana rocks. Also adding in Everflowing Chalice. This is going to be the MVP, I think. With all your proliferate, this thing is going to pay you back dividends. You can play this on 2 and proliferate 3-4 times by turn 5 or 6, and you're tapping this thing for a ton of mana. Look out for that one. I would not skimp on that one. So that's going to be it for the $10 upgrades. Let me just show you what we took out. Took out Cathedral Acolyte, little slow. Piper, not really on plan. Hancock, again, a little slow, not really on plan. Jason Bright is pretty decent. This one you could put back in if you like. It's going to give you a fair amount of card draw, but I feel like there's better options. Tireless Tracker, again, not on plan. We're not really looking for clues here. Lily Bowen, too slow for what it does, and we're not looking for a big dumb creature. We're looking to mill them out and play a little defensively. Young Deathclaws, this just makes creatures bigger. Again, not great. Marcus Mutant Mare came out. Again, I think this is a card draw engine. I feel like we have a few better ones. Feel free to put this one back in if you like it and take something else out. Harmonize is coming out. Harmonize doesn't really advance our game plan in any way, and we have better card draw options. Biomass Mutation. Again, we're not really trying to burst anybody out. We want to play a slower game. We want to build up those rad counters. We want to manipulate people's graveyards. So I feel like this is just not totally on plan. If you're playing with a more aggressive version, you might want to keep this in. Putrefy, decent removal spell. I feel like we have better options. We'd rather draw. We'd rather play some of the other ones that are more in line with what we're trying to do. Power Fist came out, too slow. Strength Bobblehead. Again, I don't understand why this is here. I guess they put one in each deck. There's potential for building a deck based on these, but this is not the deck. Recon Craft came out. Not a big fan of this one. Our creatures are going to grow pretty big, so the crew 2 is kind of irrelevant. I don't know. I think we have better ways to proliferate, so that's what we're going to do. Branching Evolution. We have a few Hardened Scales effects already. I don't think this one's necessary. You can leave it in if you're really into it, but I'm not a huge fan. Guardian Project, another decent card, but we're adding a bunch of creatures, so we don't have that mutant synergy like we normally would, so taking this one out, I think there's better options. I took out Ash Barrens, we added a few rocks, we added a few more ramp spells, so I just don't think this is necessary. So that's the $10 version. Let's move on to the 20 and take a look. And what are we adding? We're adding...
Alright, I'm gonna hit pause real quick just to ask you to smash that like and subscribe button. Looking at the data over on my supercomputer, I can see that only 1% of you nerds who watch my videos are subscribed. Now, I'm gonna have to sell my kidneys if I don't get about, I don't know, 32% of you guys to subscribe to my channel. Alright, back to the video.
We're adding Invasion of Amonkhet. Like I said before, this card, it's going to mill your opponent, which is what we're trying to do. It's going to give you some card advantage, and again, late game, you're going to turn this into the strongest creature in any yard, which should be a good way to close out the game or maintain control. We're adding in Bloated Contaminator. This is a big body for 3 mana. Gives us an alternate win condition with the Toxic. With all our Proliferate, this may come in handy. Also, it just proliferates when it hits something, so you just pick on whoever doesn't have defenders and you start proliferating every turn. That's pretty nice. Consuming Aberration, again, this card is wonderful in this deck. This card is going to have power and toughness equal to all cards in opponent's graveyards, and it's going to add to your mill every turn. This is a really strong card. Evolution Sage. This is going to be a fun one. Landfall, you're proliferating. You know, we're adding a bunch of proliferate triggers, so this is going to really be helpful. Azuri, Stalker of Spheres. Again, added this in the $10 version, keeping this in the 20. You are spending 4 mana for a 3/3, not great, but if you spend 7, you're going to proliferate twice and you're going to draw 2 cards, and then every other time you proliferate, you're going to continue to draw cards. This is going to be your best card draw engine in the deck, I believe. So, and it's a very cheap card, 60 cents. Flux Channeler. We have a bunch of cheap spells in this deck, so we have another Storm. We have a Storm card too. So this is a good way to just build up those rad counters real quick. Should be super fun if this goes off. Kami of the Whispered Hopes. This one wasn't in the $10 version. Bring this into the 20. It's a little more expensive for an uncommon, coming in at almost $2. And then this one is a Hardened Scales effect, and it also taps for the for total power of the creature, which can get out of hand, and you have a lot of mana sinks, so this should be fun. Marcus I brought back in. I took him out in the cheaper version. He's a decent card draw engine. You know, I think we have a few more tricks going on. We have a few more counters being added in this one, so I think he'd be a little more relevant. Bringing in Ruin Crab in this version. This one is going to landfall and mill your opponent, gets cards in the graveyard quickly. You have a few of the fetch lands, the basic fetch lands. You have a bunch of ramp, so you can hit multiple triggers off of this in a turn. And once we get a number of cards in their graveyard, we can start doing things to manipulate it. Solemn Simulacrum. I love this card in just about every EDH deck. He's going to fix your mana if you don't hit your mana, especially in a 3-color deck. And he's going to replace himself when he dies. He's pretty powerful. We have Tainted Observer coming in. He was also in the $10 version. So this is a way to keep proliferating. We're playing 27 creatures or so. So this guy is going to be able to trigger multiple times in a turn potentially, or every turn you're going to proliferate. So I'm looking for these repeatable proliferate triggers, and this is a good offering there. So I like him. He's fairly cheap. The body's alright. We got Toxic, like I said. You know, we have 2 toxic creatures, so we have that alternate win condition if we end up having to go that route. Contentious Plan coming in this version as well. Just a cheap cantrip that proliferates. You know, something we're looking to do. Kadama's Reach, one of the better ramp spells in the game. So we'll put that in there. Fix our lands. Spread the Sickness, a removal spell that proliferates. It's sorcery speed, which is a knock against it, but you know, I think that extra synergy is going to be useful. Alright, looking at Instance, bringing in Experimental Augury. This is a cheap cantrip, proliferates, gives you some card selection. I think it's just a good thing to do early while we're setting up everything else we're trying to do. Flotsam and Jetsam, like I said before, I don't think we're going to cast the left side for this card very often, but the right side is very powerful late game. After we've milled them a ton, this card's going to allow us to cast the strongest card from every player's graveyard for only 6 mana. This could win you a number of games, so look out for this. I think this is going to be a really good one. Looking at Artifacts, bringing in that Ever-Flowing Chalice. I think this card's going to be MVP with all the proliferate. This is going to be super fun. Play it on 2 or 4 or whatever. Fits into your curve, and then just proliferate it out, and you're going to get a ton of mana from this card throughout the game. Love it, love it. We're adding Golgari and Simic Signet here. We dropped Dimir for this version. I think we have just some better cards to play, and green is the color we want to ensure, so we're dropping the Signet that doesn't have the green mana. We brought back in Branching Evolution. We want a few more Hardened Scales effects. And then we also brought in Karn's Bastion in this version. This is a really cool land. We upped our land count by 1 to the previous edition because this one doesn't give us any color fixing, and we dropped our Dimir Signet in lieu of this one. So for 4 mana, you tap it, you proliferate. Again, we have a number of ways to proliferate every single turn. So once we get to a point where we have a few rad counters on everyone, we can keep rolling those. We have ways to, you know, keep that mill train going. And also, if we ever hit a poison counter on them, you know, we can proliferate those out by playing a very defensive position with our creatures growing. A number of them being flying, a number of ways to gain life. So I think that could be pretty good. In this version, we are taking out Harold and Bob, Lumbering Megasloth. We don't need a big dumb creature. We're taking out Night King Ambusher. Just, it's asymmetrical rad counters. We want to kind of keep that going. We took out Thrumming Bird, which was in the $10 version, so that never came in. I mentioned we took out Dimir Signet, which was in the $10 version. We took out Frayne's Sanity, which was in the Precon. Just not a fan of this card. Again, asymmetrical. I don't really like it. We're also taking out Harmonize, Biomass Mutation, Putrefy, Cathedral Acolyte, Piper Wright, Panic, Jason Bright, Tireless Tracker, Lily Bowen, and Young Deathclaws. Power Fist, Strength Bobblehead, Recon Craft Theta, and Guardian Project, and Ash Barrens. I don't think any of these cards really fit our theme, and there's just better options. Alright, we're looking at the $50 version now. This one's getting a little spicy. Bringing in Invasion of Amonkhet, mills them, gives us some card advantage, gives us a late game win con by stealing the best creature in our yard. Bloated Contaminator, nice cheap big creature, alternate win con on the Toxic, another chance to proliferate every turn. Love this one. Consuming Aberration. Again, I said it in the other 2 versions, but I think this card is awesome. I think it's going to get huge. It's going to increase your mill. It's going to mill extra cards, and it's going to just kind of roll in with those rad counters. Really fun card. Look out for him. Evolution Sage. We're going to proliferate whenever we drop a land. We have some extra ramp, so that's pretty good. Azuri is going to be real fun. He's going to, if you cast him for 7, which I would recommend doing most of the time, you need the defensive creature, you're going to draw 2 cards and you can proliferate twice, and then every time you proliferate, you're going to draw another card. It's going to be one of the better card draw engines we have going. Flux Channeler is next. If we can chain a bunch of spells, we're going to proliferate a bunch of times, get those rad counters going. That's going to be really fun. Kami of the Whispered Hopes, another Hardened Scales effect. This one's going to tap for a ton of mana once we get that rolling. Ruin Crabs in this version. Like I said, we have a little more ramp. We have a few of the fetch lands, so this can trigger a number of times in a turn. Should be pretty good. Get some cards in the graveyard, get some of our other synergies rolling. Solemn Simulacrum fixes us. I put this in every EDH deck. I don't know if you've been watching the whole video, but I kind of gush over this in the other versions. You know this card, you love this card, play this card. Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus. This is a fun one. It's a little more pricey, a little more expensive, money-wise. He's going to proliferate twice. Every time you proliferate, you're going to get a ton of triggers if the guy hits the board. And then you can just remove counters from creatures or planeswalkers. We're going to have plenty of 1/1 counters sitting around, and he becomes indestructible, and then he's a real problem. He's going to get a bunch of counters himself as well, so he's just going to become a problem. He's going to be like a Panharmonicon for us. Should be really fun. Do recommend this guy. Here's a real spicy one. I didn't have it in the previous versions. It's a little expensive of a card, but I think it's really going to, A, it's going to mill people out pretty quickly, and B, we're going to get a ton of value from this. Putting in the best card that was milled by our opponents, we're getting 3 of them generally if you're playing in a full pod. This is a fun one. Would recommend this one if you have one in the cheaper versions sitting around. Perfect card for this deck. Contentious Plan, cheap cantrip, proliferates, just a decent card. Kodama's Reach coming in. Kodama's Reach, one of the best ramp spells in the game. Would recommend this one. And we're also adding Spread the Sickness. Spread the Sickness is going to proliferate. We're adding so much proliferate to this deck. Get those rad counters up. Get this extra 1/1 counters. Remove something. It is sorcery speed, but, you know, I think the proliferate's worth it. I think we're going to get a really double dip on those proliferates. So I like that card. I like any proliferate card. Paramount to Augury, speaking of proliferate. Here's just a cheap cantrip with some card selection. This one should be really fun. Something to do early, something to do late. Get you more cards. Flotsam Jetsam back in this version. This is going to be a great win con. 6 mana. You are taking each opponent's milling, and then you're casting any card from their graveyards for each opponent. That's going to be amazing. You're going to have some bonkers plays off of this one. Ripples of Potential. This is a fun one. So this is a proliferate, and then you can choose any number of permanents and you fade them out. This is a little bit like any of those cards that are going to just protect your whole board. It's a little more expensive card, that's why it's not in the previous versions, but you're going to hold this up for a board wipe, and you're going to grow bigger. You're going to add rad counters, and all your creatures are going to survive. So this is going to be a real gotcha moment if you land this at the right time. Alright, moving on. We're adding Everflowing Chalice. I talked about it before, but with Proliferate, this card gets nuts. Play it on 2 if you have plenty of Proliferate. It's going to get there. If not, hold it a little longer. Wait till you make sure you draw those cards and then get some real value out of it. We're adding Golgari and Simic Signet. We opted not to do Tamir in this version because we want the green mana more than the blue and black. And you'll see with some of the lands what we've added. But those extra rocks are going to give us some consistency. We have Mind Crank in this version, a little more expensive card, but whenever an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or graveyard. They're going to mill that much. So when your rad counters go off and they lose 4 or 5 life from your rad counters, they're going to mill 4 or 5 more cards. And, you don't have to do that too many times to get everyone to no cards left. So that's a pretty good one. This one we are adding, this is a real spicy one. At the beginning of each end step, your opponent's 2 or more life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Blood Chief Ascension. Once it has 3 or more quest counters, which you can proliferate, every time they mill a card, they're going to lose 2 life and you're going to gain 2 life. And that's every player. That is going to rack up quick. Especially with some of the ways like Mind Crank and some of the cards like that. So that's going to be sick. That's a really good card. Branching Evolution stays in this version. We want the extra hardened scales to be defensive. I'm adding Propaganda here. At this point, we have so many proliferate triggers. We have so many mill things that annoys people. So we want to just protect ourselves, make it unprofitable for people to attack us. So we're going to play Propaganda. Should buy us some time, especially against any swarming decks. I didn't put it in any of the previous versions. It's a little expensive. It's like almost $6. That's why it's in this version and not the previous versions. Alright, let's go down to the lands. We're adding Karn's Bastion. In this one, we're keeping that one in, Karn's Bastion. Another, repeatable proliferate effect. Get those rad counters up. If we can hit everyone with 2, 3, 4 rad counters every turn, that's going to really pay off. It's going to annoy everybody, so we're going to have to protect ourselves. We're taking out Alpha Deathclaw. It's very good removal, but it's a little expensive. I think we have other things to be doing. Tainted Observer didn't make the cut this time. He was in some of the previous versions. Tato Farmer's coming out. Doesn't have enough synergy. I think there's just better cards. Watchful Rad Stag's coming out. I like this card a lot, but all it's really performing for us is making a bunch of chump blockers, and I think we have better options. I think it just isn't that synergistic with everything else we're doing. Casualties of War came out. It's a little slow. You can think about leaving this one if you need some removal for enchantments or lands or planeswalkers. Someone at your table is playing some impactful types like that, but I think it's a little costly for what it does. Nuke launcher's coming out, kind of slow, asymmetrical, not a huge fan. Harold and Bob's coming out, Lumbering Megasloth's coming out, we don't need a big dumb dude. Nightkin Ambusher's coming out, we don't need asymmetrical rad counters. Fraying Sanity's coming out, again, we don't want asymmetrical stuff. Harmonize is coming out, Biomass Mutation's coming out, Putrefy's coming out, Cathedral Acolyte's coming out, Piper Wright's coming out, Hannock's coming out, Jason Bright's coming out, Tireless Tracker, Lily Bowen, Young Deathclaws, Power Fist, Strength Bobblehead, and Recon Craft Theta are all coming out. They just aren't on theme enough. Guardian Project's also coming out, and so is Ash Barons. Again, not on theme enough. We've replaced so many creatures, Guardian Project's just not going to have enough synergy anymore. Let's take a look at the $100 upgrades. This is when we're getting real spicy. I'm not adding too many more cards than were in the $50 version. We're just shoring up our land base, making sure we're getting real consistent, adding a few more powerful top-end cards that are going to be MVPs. But let's take a look and see what we have. We have Invasion of Omniket. Again, we're milling them, getting the best creature late game. We're getting some card advantage. A great card, and it stays on board. Plays around Wraths, things like that. Writing Vraska Betrayal Sting. This is a really fun one. This is another repeatable proliferate, great creature removal, and the win con there, if you ever get to 9, which is not difficult with all the proliferate we have going on, you can basically kill someone immediately. We're gonna give them 9 poison counters, and then we have so much proliferate to end them. Bloated Contaminator staying in here at the $100 version. Nice big creature for 3 mana. Alternate win con, synergizes with that Vraska, and it's going to proliferate every turn. Consuming Aberration, this is a super fun one. This thing is going to be huge with all the mill that we have going on. It's also going to continue to mill them extra cards every turn, so, really adds fuel to the fire of the mill engine we have going. Evolution Sage, more proliferate, repeatable proliferate, that's really good. Azuri is some payoff for all of our proliferate. If you cast them for 7, you're going to draw 2 cards. Great card draw engine. Flux Channeler. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you're going to proliferate. We have a bunch of nice cantrips. This one you should be able to storm off with. Get a bunch of rad counters and really take advantage of that. And really snowball those effects. Kami the Whispering Hopes. This is a nice one. It's Hardened Scales effect. That's for a bunch of mana. That's going to be really nice. Ruined Crab. Nice cheap blocker. This is going to get a bunch of cards in the graveyard real quick. We have some ramp, synergies with what we have going on. Solemn Simulacrum. Going to just fix your land if you have a bad draw. Replace itself. Very good card. Takuthal. Inquiry Dominus. Going to proliferate twice. And then this thing, you can also give it an indestructible counter, which is quite easy to do with all the 1/1 counters we have floating around. So you basically do this for 5 mana. If you pay 4 life, make a 3/5 indestructible that's going to proliferate twice. Really strong play. It's not going away. Breach the Multiverse is going to be one of our toppers. This is going to be one of our win conditions. We're going to steal the best cards from people's graveyards. We're going to mill them for 10 cards. Just in line with everything else we're doing in this deck. Should be really fun. Economist Reach is one of the best ramp spells in the game, so that helps us with a lot of consistency. Spread the Sickness. I'm a little iffy on this card at this price point, but I think it still makes the cut. It's going to destroy any creature, and then you're going to proliferate. And with all those proliferate triggers and synergies, I think it's going to pay off. Experimental Augury. Experimental Augury is just a nice cheap cantrip. It's going to proliferate. Gives you some card selection. Helps fix you if you need to play it early. Late game, find the card you need. Really strong card. Ripples of Potential. It's going to be a great tool for you when somebody board wipes. You're going to proliferate, and then you're going to keep all the creatures that you proliferated on. It's going to be really strong. Here's the spicy big one. It's taken up a 1/5 of our budget, but I think this card's going to just win games by itself. This card's going to slowly wipe one opponent's board, and then you're going to double proliferate every single turn. It's going to be disgusting. People are going to want to kill you pretty quick once this hits play, but you're going to get a ton of value out of this. Everflowing Chalice. This card's amazing. You're going to get so much mana from this card. With all the proliferate. Play it on 2, play it on 4 if you can't proliferate, but you're going to get a ton of value here. We got 2 of the signets, keeping the green signets, a Golgarian Simic. We're adding Mindcrank in this one. This is going to synergize with a lot of the rad counter stuff, so every time they take damage from the rad, they're going to mill that many more cards. Should be really good, should snowball. Blood Chief Ascension, this one is cute. So each time someone loses 2 or more life, you can put a counter on this. And then once it has 3, every time a card goes to their graveyard, they're going to lose 2 life, and you're going to gain 2 life. So when you mill them for 5 with your rad counters, you're potentially gaining 10 life. You know, they're going to lose 10 life. This card's going to get gross real quick. This is a MVP. So here's another cool one. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then if the creature has 3 or more, you flip it over. And it's going to flip over into a land that's going to allow you to give them flying and +X/+X. There's another +1/+1 counter card, and it's also going to be just a nice win condition. You can bonk somebody for a ton of damage, and this is repeatable. This is going to happen every turn. We're adding Journey to Eternity. Enchant creature you control. When it dies, return it to the battlefield under your control, then you flip this over. So this is protection on a creature. Make sure it's a safe time to play it so it doesn't go to the graveyard. Then it's going to give you some recursion on any creature that's gone to your graveyard. You're going to have a bunch of extra mana to spend, so this is good for your long game plan. Again, like I said earlier, I'm shifting this deck more towards control, mill, like turtles up type of thing, so this card's really going to help with that. You're going to get creatures every turn. Adding propaganda. Like I said, we're turtling out here. We don't want to incentivize anyone to attack us, so make them pay that mana. This should shut down any sort of token decks really trying to bully you out. Alright, so here's where most of the money on this $100 version is going. We are adding a bunch of lands. Just shore up our mana base, make sure we have some consistency. If we can't get on board, we can't get the mana we need, we can't play the game. So, I feel like it's a good investment here to just get your mana shored up. Rather than adding too many more spells to the deck, let's just get this consistency. Make sure we can participate in every game and have fun. So we're adding Botanical Sanctum. We're adding Dreamroot Cascade. I'm just picking some of the cheaper dual lands that are effective for us rather than the real expensive ones. Get that more bang for our buck here. We're adding Karn's Bastion, another repeatable Proliferate, Lana War Waste. Make sure we get that mana. I think we have enough ways to gain health. This health loss is pretty irrelevant. Adding another Pain Land in Yamavaya Coast. And we're also adding Underground River, the Dimir Pain Land, and that is going to round us out. So those are all the cards that we're going to be adding for $100. Spending a lot of money on that Contagion Engine. There's a bunch of other options. I think that's going to be the best card in this deck. Cards that didn't make the cut this time around are Contentious Plan from some of the previous versions. Branching Evolution didn't make the cut. We're taking out Evolving Wilds, Nesting Ground, Mariposa Military Base, Path to Ancestry, 1 Swamp, and a Terramorphic Expanse. I think the other lands are just more consistent. Make more sense to me. Also taking out Nuka Launcher, taking out Alpha Deathclaw, Tato Farmer, Watchful Radstag, Casualties of War, Harold and Bob, Lumbering Megasloth, Nightkin Ambusher, Fraying Sanity, Harmonize, Biomass Mutation, Putrefy, Power Fist, Strength Bobblehead, Recon Craft Theta, Guardian Project, Ash Barons, Phaedro Acolyte, Piper Wright, Hannock, Jason Bright, Tireless Tracker, Lily Bowen, and Young Deathclaws. So like I said up front, the real goal of this deck is to get a bunch of rad counters on them, try and mill them out while we're creating a real turtly defensive board that eventually could swing and be aggressive if we need to once we've established some control in the game or everyone else is fighting amongst each other. But we should be able to be very defensive and mill them out and proliferate our way to victory. So let me know what you think. Do you like the deck? Do you not like the deck? What cards would you have picked? I would love to hear from you. I've had a ton of other options that didn't make it, fell on the cutting room floor. Thanks, like, subscribe, do all that great stuff. See ya.